This is something I've been working on for a while. It took a lot of time, but I've finally compiled 3 supposedly true stories that took place during summer jobs. It was a typical exhausting Tuesday night. I worked at a popular fast food chain right off the highway, and tonight I was on the closing shift completely by myself. It was around 9:45 p.m. The front doors lock at 10, and I was already in the back kitchen wiping down the counters, counting the minutes until I could finally go home. The restaurant was dead quiet, except for the constant, low hum of the industrial fryers. Suddenly, I heard it. The sharp, familiar chime of the front door swinging open. My stomach sank a bit. It was 15 minutes to close, and the last thing I wanted was a late customer. I walked out to the lobby to tell them the kitchen was shutting down, but the lobby was completely empty. The front door was tightly shut. I walked over, checked the handle, and realized I had completely turned the deadbolt earlier. It was locked. I shook my head, assuming it was just a glitch, and walked back to the employee break room to grab my phone. But when I looked at the break room table, my blood ran cold. Sitting right next to my phone was a crumpled receipt that hadn't been there 5 minutes ago. Written on the back in messy, frantic ink were 4 words. Don't turn off the lights. I stood frozen, realizing the chime wasn't a glitch. Someone had slipped inside before I locked up, and they were still inside with me. My heart hammered against my ribs. The back hallway was lined with heavy metal doors, the dry storage manager's office, the walk-in freezer, and the electrical closet. All of them were pitch black. I slowly reached down to grab my phone, trying not to make a single sound. Just as my fingers brushed the screen, the overhead fluorescent lights in the break room flickered and went completely black. In the total darkness, I heard the heavy metallic scrape of the walk-in freezer door swinging open down the hall. Then, the sound of slow, heavy footsteps walking across the tile toward the break room. I didn't think. I bolted out the back kitchen exit, shoved the heavy panic bar open, and sprinted straight into the parking lot. I threw myself into my car, locked the doors, and called 911. While staring at the dark restaurant, through the drive-thru window, I could see a tall, dark silhouette standing right where I'd been wiping down the counters just moments before. When the police arrived 10 minutes later, the building was empty, but they found a sleeping bag, a duffel bag of clothes, and a massive hunting knife hidden on the top shelf of the dry storage closet. This guy had been living in the ceiling crawl space for 3 days, watching the closing shift schedule. I quit the next morning. I used to work at a local ice cream parlor in a relatively quiet suburban town. Because it was summer, we stayed open until 11 p.m. On this particular night, my coworker had called out sick, leaving me to close down the shop alone. By 10:50 p.m., a thick fog had rolled in, and the streets outside were completely deserted. I turned off the bright neon open sign and started scooping the leftover ice cream back into the freezer. As I was cleaning, I got a distinct, prickly feeling of being watched. I looked up at the massive front glass windows. Because it was pitch black outside and the lights were bright inside the shop, the glass acted like a perfect mirror. I could only see my own reflection. But as I got closer, I noticed a dark shape blocking out the headlights of the street lamp across the road. I walked closer to the glass, cupping my hands around my eyes to see through the glare. Standing exactly 2 inches away from the glass, right on the other side of the window, was a tall man in a heavy winter coat. He wasn't moving. He was just staring directly at me, his face completely expressionless. I panicked and yelled through the glass that we were closed. He didn't blink. He just raised his hand, pressed his palm flat against the window, and began slowly dragging down, leaving a thick, greasy smear on the glass. I backed away toward the register to grab my phone, but as I did, I heard a loud, heavy thud coming from the back supply room. The man at the window wasn't trying to get in. He was acting as a distraction. The heavy wooden door to the supply room, which led to the alleyway out back, slowly began to creak open. I froze behind the counter. I didn't know what to do. A second man, shorter and wearing a dark hooded sweatshirt, stepped into the kitchen area. In his right hand, he was holding a crowbar. He didn't see me behind the tall cash register counter immediately. He was looking towards the front entrance. Knowing I had nowhere to run, I grabbed the heavy industrial metal ice cream coop off the counter and slammed it against the metal sink, making a deafening noise that echoed through the shop. I screamed at the top of my lungs. The cops are already on the phone. It was a total bluff, but it somehow worked. The man in the hoodie jumped, looked at me in shock, and turned around, sprinting back into the dark alleyway. The man in the glass window instantly vanished into the fog. The police later found out that the back alley door hadn't been latched properly by the morning shift. The two men were part of a local crew targeting cash businesses right at closing time. To this day, I can still see the man's palm sliding down the foggy glass window. Hi, I'm 19 years old, and this summer I got a job as an evening IT intern for a corporate office building. My main task was simple: stay until around 9 p.m., monitor the server racks in the basement, and lock up the main office doors after the daytime shift left. The basement was a maze of concrete hallways, but the server room itself was high-tech, lined with wall-mounted security monitors displaying live feeds of the entire building. By 8:30 p.m., the upper floors were completely empty, and I was sitting at the desk scrolling through my phone when I noticed something weird out of the corner of my eye. On the monitor 4 feed, which showed the main third floor hallway, the automated security camera was slowly panning from left to right. But then, it stopped. These cameras were motion activated. They only stopped panning if they were locked onto a moving target. I stared closely at the screen. The hallway looked completely empty. Suddenly, the camera jerked downwards, tracking something moving along the floor. Out of the shadow of the conference room, a man crawled out on his hands and knees. He was moving fast, like an animal, scurrying directly towards the stairwell elevator. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched him disappear into the stairwell feed. The camera on the second floor immediately woke up, tracking him as he scrambled down the next flight of stairs. He was coming straight to the basement. I scrambled under my metal desk, pulling my knees to my chest just as the heavy creaking door to the server room clicked open. The room was completely dark except for the flashing green and blue LED lights from the server racks. From under the desk, I could see a pair of filthy, bare feet step into the room. The intruder didn't move. He just stood there, breathing heavily. I held my breath, terrified that the sound of my heartbeat would give me away. Suddenly, my phone, which was sitting face up on the top of the desk, lit up. It was a spam text. The bright white light from the screen illuminated the entire underside of the desk. The bare feet slowly turned towards me. Before I could bend down, I shoved the heavy rolling desk chairs into his shins with all my strength. He let out a yell and stumbled backwards into the server rack. I scrambled out from under the desk, bolted past him into the pitch-black concrete hallway, and ran blindly towards the emergency exit stairs. I burst through the exit doors into the street just as a police cruiser happened to be driving past. I flagged them down, hyperventilating. They caught the guy 10 minutes later, hiding inside the building's ventilation system. It turned out he was a severely unstable individual who had sneaked into the building during lunch hours and had been hiding in the ceilings for weeks. The thought of him crawling down those stairs on his hands and knees still keep me up to this night.